My name is Marsha Goldberg, and that's how I introduce myself. Well, I am an artist, a painter primarily, and I'm also a mother. I have two adult daughters. We're in my studio in Highland Park, New Jersey. I've been working in this studio since I moved into the house in 2000. And in fact, this studio is probably the reason we chose this house, because it is a big space that's somewhat separate from the rest of the house. And although it's a basement, it's not underground because the house is built on a grade. So I have access to the outdoors, which is always important to me. You know, my husband knew that if I didn't have a place to work, it wasn't going to be easy to live with me. So I grew up in Beverly, Massachusetts. It's a small town on the North Shore of Massachusetts, north of Boston. It has beaches, obviously. It's a small city, I guess you could call it. And fortunately for me, when I was in high school, an art school opened in the town. My public school didn't have a very good art department in any of the grades, but this gave me an opportunity to take art classes while I was still growing up. I have two younger sisters. My father worked as a dentist, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom who did a lot of volunteer work and kept very busy, but was essentially always there for the kids. And it was a somewhat suburban setting, sometimes a little boring. Yeah, so the beaches really helped. You know, being close to the shore made it more interesting than it might otherwise have been, I think. But if you've ever gone swimming in New England in the summer, you know that the water is quite cold. Within my family, I would say my father was the biggest influence. As I said, he worked full time as a dentist, which took a lot of time and attention and was very stressful, but he always had hobbies. He was always making things. And he was just going into one thing after another. After he retired, he made stained glass like it was his job. He was always working in his basement studio, so I feel like I'm kind of repeating that to a certain degree. I don't think he ever considered being an artist. You know, he needed to work, he needed to make money, and he came from an immigrant. His parents were both immigrants to this country, and they didn't have, you know, they grew up very poor, so it wasn't an option. But I think had he had that option, he might have done that. Yeah. I can't say that I remember the first time I made something that felt truly mine, because I was always making things. I was always drawing. I was always making art, making of some form or another a priority in whatever I was studying or doing. I have a lot of these number 2 brushes, very small brushes. And that's how I do it. That's when I'm not thinking about my work, I may be thinking about nature. I might be looking at, of course, everything kind of comes back to the work in some way or another. But I do really, my work draws from looking at nature, looking at other art, listening to music, reading. I read a lot. I mean, currently I'm listening to a lot of Bach because I'm learning to play that on the piano. So I'm thinking about that. And the most recent artwork, I was in New York last week and I saw some art by Matisse, who I always go back to, and somebody very contemporary, Julie Marettu, whose work I really like. But that's this week, you know, it changes all the time. And everything that you look at stays somewhere in your head, whether you're thinking about it consciously or not, right? I think that my work as an artist really comes from making sense of what I see. And even as a child, I was always thinking about color, thinking about, you know, how do you get from that green to this green? What would you add to this color to make that color? Or how these colors relate to each other? So I don't know that even though at a lot of times as a painter, I've done much more representational work than I'm currently doing. The work I'm doing is not obviously representational. You can't see a figure, you can't name the place or a landscape, even if all those things are kind of influencing me. But at other times, I did work from the figure, or I did experience something and want to make a painting out of it directly in an understandable to everyone else kind of way. To show you where I was in 2012, that was just something that started as a response to a news photo of an explosion. So you might think that's a painting of a cloud or a cloudy sky, but it was or a drawing. It's a drawing. It's a pencil drawing on paper, and it's if you get up close to it, you'll see that it's all made up of lines. There's no erasing involved. There's no smudging involved. It's just intersecting lines, kind of like an etching, like you'd see on an etching or an engraving. And it started as a kind of idly drawing something that was on the laptop, making a drawing, because I do a lot of drawings from observation. And but then I really got caught up in this subject matter of news photos of explosions, because there's just so much about it that interested me. Visually, it interested me as drawing clouds. It's an abstraction, even though it's something that really exists. But it also is, it's an abstraction in the sense that anybody who's witnessing an explosion never sees this, because it's always moving, right? It's there and then it's gone. But in a news photo, it's there permanently, and it represents something violent and terrible, and yet it looks kind of abstract and quiet. And there were a lot of ways to think about that. So I worked with that idea for a long time. And the drawing to the right of it is an example of making it, trying to take it a little further. So initially, that's the same synthetic paper. I do think that whatever place I'm in certainly affects how I work and what I work on. And that's not just what I see in that place, but the culture of the place. So I grew up in Boston. My parents had I grew up in Beverly, as I said, but my parents grew up in Boston, and Boston was the city for us. And then I went to school in Boston. I went to art school in Boston, which has a particular culture compared with New York, for example, which you probably heard about. You can draw your own conclusions about that. So I'm sure that's affected me as an artist, although I haven't lived in Boston for many years now. So, but related to that, I do like to travel, and wherever I travel, I come back with something that feeds the work. Well, my life right now, most of my time is spent right here, actually in that part of the room, working. A good part of most days. Of course, I take a day off. I go into New York to look at galleries and museums, or I travel, yeah. So my days are pretty much shaped by working in the studio. I have taught in the past. I'm not teaching right now, so my schedule is kind of my own, which is great. When I wake up here, I am usually ready to have my first cup of coffee of the day and get to work after I've, just kind of woken up. And I like living in a place where I can just open the door and step outside when the weather is nice, and often see somebody that I know walking down the street, because it is a small town. I think there have been a lot of times in my life as an artist where I questioned how meaningful is it really to spend your day by yourself making paintings that people may or may not see? But either I've just lived long enough or I've been lucky enough to have the chance to spend this much time in my studio that I don't dwell on that question much anymore, because it just feels like the thing that I do, and to keep myself from doing it doesn't make any sense. And sometimes people take pleasure or learn something from looking at my work, which is fantastic. It's not the goal of doing it. You know, for me, there's always just some visual idea that I have that I feel compelled to realize in a painting or a drawing or a print or whatever it is. And when it's done, I'm usually not 100% satisfied with it, but that's good because then I want to do another one. Sometimes I'm surprised, which is fantastic if I'm happily surprised. Sometimes I'm surprised and I don't like it, but I learned something. So it just keeps me engaged, you know. That's all we can really ask for in life, is just to be interested in how we spend our days. And that's why I do it. The idea is vague until you know, you work on it. For me, you know. And in fact, teaching, I realized, you know, pretty early on when I started teaching, that a lot of people, or maybe I realized this even before I started teaching, that a lot of people think an artist has a picture in their head and then they just make it. Well, it rarely works that way. You know, you have some idea, and it could be a political idea we were talking about before, or it could be just a visual idea. You know, what would this kind of blue look like surrounded by this kind of orange? And you can't know what you're going to make out of that until you just start to do it. And then it might change. That blue might turn into green, and that orange is, you know, erased or whatever. You know, you change it, and that's often the challenging part, is letting the painting do what it has to do, or the artwork do what it has to do. Writers often say the same things. Well, if I imagine the future of myself as an artist, at the moment I feel like what I'm doing right now, I could do it for a long time and just keep doing variations of it. Something, you know, it seems connected to what I've done in the past. There are some pretty limited parameters that I'm working within that still feel like they have a lot of possibilities. But, you know, I can also imagine that next week I could decide, no, I'll go back and paint with oil on canvas again, which is something I did for a long time, you know. Yeah.